Our movie starts in a creepy valley located in Bhutan. The year is 1995. Our four main characters decides to go on a hiking trip to enjoy their boring day during the era before smartphones. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention their names. The four friends were Greg, Paul, Fiona, and Ruthie. Day 1. After one of them blows into what looks like a flute instrument, Paul then seems to hear something calling to him, and like an idiot he walks until he falls down a crevice. Greg then runs towards him for rescue, and finds Paul sitting down facing a bizarre-looking skeleton. While muttering something to himself, the skeleton appears to move slightly, but our hot Greg gets Paul out in time. The rest of the squad carry Paul out and spot a nearby empty house, so they stay there for now. Later on, we're at day 2. Paul's condition doesn't appear to get better, as he is just lying around in silence. Outside, Ruthie appears to see a figure in the ongoing snowstorm, as she steps back carefully. The creepy figure matches her footsteps before starting to charge toward her, but she runs back inside the house and immediately shuts the door. When she hears pounding outside, she continues to block the door until she hears Greg and Fiona. Ruthie asks them if they heard or saw anyone outside, but of course they deny it. Typical horror movie. As Ruthie is sleeping later, it appears as though Paul is whispering something in her ear, and we get no damn clue about what she just whispered. Anyways, let's keep going. Day 3. Greg, Fiona, and Ruthie bring Paul with them as they continue their hike in the area. Ruthie appears dead until she takes out a knife and stabs Greg and Fiona. Someone had a period on that day, I assume, throwing their bodies over the edge of the cliff before she throws herself off, leaving Paul by himself while he simply blows into the flute instrument. Jumping to Missouri in 2018, where former Detective James Lassumber is working in a security store. He frequently hears a voice saying, "Where were you?" Since it has been a year after his wife and son died in an awful car accident. He frequently looks out for a girl called Amanda, as he is friends with her mother Nora. And unfortunately, Amanda had a bad relationship with her mother Nora since her father passed away, so she looks to James as her safe place friend. Later on, Amanda runs away for some reason, and of course Nora calls James for help. They find a message on her mirror written in blood saying, "The empty man made me do it." After official detectives take on the case, James decides to do a little investigation of his own. James visits the high school to find Amanda's friend, who's named Devara. She sits in his car and tells her about a couple nights ago when she and Amanda and other friends of hers were walking across the nearby bridge where Amanda decided to summon the empty man, an urban legend that takes 3 days to appear. On the first day, those who summon him will hear him calling to them. On the second day, he makes his presence known to them. On the third day, he finds them. The teens all blew into a bottle as per tradition. Devara also remembers seeing Amanda whispering in Brandon's ear similar to how Paul whispered to Ruthie. Remember those guys from 1995. Let's keep going. Now, Devara thinks she sees the empty man in the woods before she leaves James's car. Later that night, James goes by the bridge to continue looking into Amanda's disappearance. He finds the bottle that they were using and he blows into it. James then walks down a ladder that leads underneath the bridge where he comes across the hanged corpses of some teenagers. The same message from Amanda's mirror is also written. Meanwhile, Devara enters a spa, and when it is foggy enough, the empty man attacks, stabbing her with a pair of scissors, but making it look like she was stabbing herself. It is officially ruled as a suicide, but James finds the circumstances too unnatural to be believable. It is now day 1 for James. He looks further into the origin of the empty man. He reads into a cult called the Pontifex Institute that has beliefs originating from places like Bhutan, which would explain how the 4 friends came across empty man there. James goes to the Institute's location, where leader Arthur Parsons speaks before a whole crowd. Afterwards, he talks to James and references empty man, referring to him as an entity that provides his followers with what they desire as long as they do his bidding. Later on day 2, James starts following people associated with the Institute. He is led to a hospital where an older Paul is sitting in a vegetative state, but the people entering his room appear to be bowing and chanting something to him. The other detectives chastise James for getting involved in the case when he is retired. He later visits Nora, who is still worried about her daughter. James asks her if Amanda knew about the two of them apparently being together, but Nora says no. James is led into the woods where he finds what looks like the entire cult hooded like empty man, stepping toward him closer and closer before they chase him. James runs to his car and escapes from the cult. On day 3, James finds Amanda, who is acting under the influence of the cult, an empty man. She explains to James that an empty man with nothing to lose or gain is the perfect vessel to project empty man's messages. She starts repeating "Where were you?" to James, as he is forced to relive the trauma that has been haunting him. On the night that Allison and Henry were killed, he was engaging in an affair with Nora. He has since blamed himself for not being there to have prevented it. James, now fully drained of his consciousness and humanity, goes into the hospital to Paul's room. He unloads his gun into Paul's head. The doctors and nurses, all members of the cult, look to James as their new empty man. And the end. What do you think about this one, guys? Let me know your opinion in the comments section below. Until next time, cheers.